and welcome to In Conversation, where we bring you voices that inspire, provoke thought, and explore the many layers of the human experience. I'm your host, Anita, and today we have with us someone whose journey beautifully straddles science and art, the clinical and the creative. Dr. Raj Velamoor is a practicing psychiatrist, a poet, and the author of the novel Reunion. Originally from India and now based in Canada, he is a psych artist, a term that blends psychiatry and artistic expression. His work explores not just the mind but the heart through both medicine and storytelling. Dr. Raj, welcome to the show. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be part of this conversation and looking forward to talking with you.
Now, let's begin with a broad lens. You've lived into remarkably diverse cultural environments, India and Canada. So I'd love to hear your reflections on multiculturalism. How has this experience shaped your worldview, both as a person and as a writer?
Thank you. That's a very good question to start with. I have been in Canada now since 1984, and I came via England, prior to which I was in India. With regard to Canada, I think Canada has been a very welcoming country. Although the weather is somewhat harsh, that is something that one needs to come to terms with, learn to cope with, and be able to still lead an interesting life, In answer to your question about the multiculturalism in Canada, this was really the idea of Pierre Elliott Trudeau. I don't know if you have heard his name. He was the Prime Minister of Canada, the father of Justin Trudeau, who was the previous Prime Minister. So he passed the Multiculturalism Act in 1988. So multiculturalism in Canada is recognized, it is institutionalized, and also it has been enshrined in the Constitution of Canada. So in a way it is policy driven because it also hinges upon the fact that they need immigrants. Canada is a very vast country with a huge geography, but the population is very sparse. So only certain areas like Toronto, Montreal, Quebec are more densely populated than other parts of Canada. So they have a policy of inviting about 400,000 immigrants a year, So this is policy driven, if you like. So in that kind of context, I think you find that the Canadian identity is somewhat dissimilar or different from the identity in the United States. In the United States, the whole concept of assimilation is promoted. In other words, you all enter the melting pot and then come out looking and sounding like Americans. Whereas Canada, and thanks to Trudeau, he emphasized that it is important for you to maintain your original identity and culture, which is your foundational culture, if you like. For me, it would be India, So he promoted the idea of a hyphenated Canadian. In other words, I like to call myself an Indo-Canadian rather than Canadian. So it is more an integration, it is more a mosaic, rather than assimilation. And this way, I think it certainly enriches the Canadian life experience because you are keeping your own self intact, if you like, in varying degrees. And at the same time, trying to enjoy what the host country has to offer. In contrast, I guess, having come from India, I would think that Canadian or Indian immigration, if you like, or Indian multiculturalism is more inherited. They've not come from somewhere else. They've been there for thousands of years. So the Hindus, the Muslims, the Sikhs, the Christians, they are part of the Indian life experience. And although they add layers of complexity and tension to the Indian life, I suppose, and if one were to go into the fact that there's the rise of populism and there is a tendency for majoritarian nationalism to become the defining principle of who an Indian is, then
Right.
we get into a different kind of conversation. So my sense is that I have straddled or lived between two cultures, the
Mm-hmm.
Indian culture and the Canadian culture.
Right.
And that defines who I am and
Mm-hmm.
who I have become. So I would like to think that I have a broader lens uh,
Mm-hmm.
of perspective of the world view, if you like. And to me, I think that is something that is a nice thing, because then you're able to see the world in a slightly broader perspective.
So two very different cultures
Yeah.
and an amalgamation of experiences. So
Yes.
that's, I think, the
Agree.
summary of all of that.
Yes.
Um, Now, you have a very well established career in psychiatry, yet
Mhm.
you've also taken the deeply creative path of becoming a poet and a novelist.
Mhm.
So, can you tell us about that transition? What moved you towards fiction? Was there a particular moment, a memory, or a feeling that set you on that path?
Yeah, I think, I was schooled in psychiatry or
Mm,
psychological sciences, and therefore the approach to psychiatry is more biological, more organic,
mhm,
and
mhm,
therefore you learn to examine the human mind within the
mhm.
biological confines uh,
Right.
of science,
Mhm,
So, and this discipline helps you to inform people about what are called facts,
mhm,
Whereas with fiction, I would think that it's a different journey altogether. It is more like storytelling, and it has different truths, and you don't have very strictly defined boundaries to
mhm.
writing fiction, because you start off with something, and then the characters take you wherever they want you to take.
Right.
So
Right.
that is a slightly more adventurous journey, if you like. With regard to my departure into
Mhm,
fiction, I don't think, I think I would call it more an expansion,
mhm,
because basically you're trying to understand the human mind and the human heart, if you like, whereas uh, I am concentrating more with examining the human mind in the other
mhm,
discipline. So that is the difference. And also, I think, whereas psychiatry has taught me to explain facts and communicate
mhm,
facts to people through prose and through poetry. Basically, you are trying to have a plot and characters and are able to tell a story. And with poetry, I suppose it's more related to fiction, to
mhm.
emotion, communicating emotion, if you like. So that would be the main difference. I don't know if I answered your question, but those are the two sort of domains,
You
roughly.
did. You
Yeah.
did, and I think I think that makes you a complete writer, so to say, because on the one side you're tackling the human mind and its depths, and on the other side you're exploring, human actions and human behavior, and the other side. So that kind of, I think that would give a completeness to your works.
Except that it
Which.
came very late in my life. I started writing a few years ago, whereas I've been doing, psychiatry for all my life. So it is like making into a foray into something that was not familiar, and there was some risk involved in doing that, because I didn't know how it was going to turn out. Yeah.
Well, better late than never, and I think your inroads into the human mind probably helped shape your poetic, you
Yeah,
know, um, journey as well. I think so.
yeah, it does indeed. My wife tells me that I'm a fairly good listener, and that even
Uh-huh.
if we were on a short flight with someone, I would be able to extract a whole life story from someone sitting next to me. So you do learn how to listen and
Yeah,
learn to ask the right questions. Not necessarily leading questions, but keeping the question open ended, so that the recipient has a broader frame into which he can place his answer. Yeah.
absolutely. That will give a depth to your work,
Yes.
which which is seen in your novel Reunion. It is a deeply evocative work. It resonates with themes of identity, memory, and emotional reconciliation. Can you tell us what inspired the story? Were there personal experiences or relationships that played a role in this narrative?
Yeah, maybe I should go right back to my family in Hyderabad, India. I come from, I would say, a middle class family. My father was a university professor in political
Mhm,
science, and my mother was a homemaker. She barely had, middle school education. Uh,
mhm,
but my father was very inspiring in that he was a great speaker. You could wake him up at 2 in the morning and ask him to make a speech, and he would be able to make
mhm.
it. And also, he was a wordsmith. He knew how to use words. And what I
Right.
learned from him is not to use 10 words if five would do, you know,
Mm,
kind of brevity that really comes handy in poetry, especially. And also, I think one doesn't write to have very long stories. So the other inspiration I would say is when I started reading early on novels of R.K. Narayan, for example, who in 200 pages be able to tell you a very joyful, meaningful story, you know. And that
absolutely.
really inspired me. And then authors like Kutsia of South Africa, Alice
Mm,
Munro of Canada, these people kind of inspire you to at least think that you too can write, especially R.K. Narayan. When you read him, you feel maybe I can write too, because the
right.
sentences are very simply written, they are not
Right.
very, long words and so on. And then I think when I retired in 2016 from clinical work,
Mhm,
I still do some
mhm,
academic work of teaching and do some research. A colleague of mine presented me with a notebook which was encased in leather. It was very soft to touch,
mhm.
and it was of the
Right.
size of a novella.
Mm,
So the first thought that came to my mind is maybe I could write a story in that.
mm.
And then I just left it and forgot all about it. And then COVID came. And
Right.
during that time, I think I picked up the notebook and started writing. And then, it took a life of its own. And before I
Mm,
knew, before I found out that I had written about 300 pages, and, I wrote to a couple of colleagues I trusted
mm.
before I was able to publish it to ask what they thought. And these are people who would have told me candidly if it was not worth publishing. So they encouraged me and said that maybe there is something in it to publish. So that is how I was inspired to write. And in terms of the people ask me, is it autobiographical? It's not autobiographical,
Mhm,
but stories have to come from one's consciousness.
mm.
So my sense is that these are, it must have grown from conversations, from observations, from silences, in my own life, and how basically in this novel, I try to emphasize who we are, where we came from, and what has become of us. So in a way, migration plays a big part.
Right.
Families in which you see mini revolutions happening. So
Mm.
that is how I think this came together, and we have a novel. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think it's shaped by life. It's
Mhm.
not just completely autobiographical. It's a mix of, I think, autobiography and the life
Yes.
around you. Like
Hmm.
you said, the sounds and the silences. So it's shaped by all of those, I think.
Yes.
Now, as a psychiatrist, you work with the inner lives of people every day. That gives you a unique lens into human behavior and emotional complexity. How has your clinical background shaped your characters and psychological landscapes you explore in your writing?
Yeah, I've always been a curious person.
Mhm.
I like to know how people think, reason, argue, believe, feel. I guess I'm trained to do that, but even if I wasn't trained, I have a natural inclination to do that. I like talking to people.
Mhm.
I like human company. So I think my discipline taught me how to listen between the lines, and also that
Right.
the most important part of speech is the pause. So things
Mm.
like that. And I think this is how I think I was able to shape the characters in the novel from bits and pieces from different people I must have met in my life, especially in India and subsequently after moving to Canada. So I would say it's a way to metabolize experience. Okay, and that is how I would think that my chosen profession of psychiatry might have just helped me in forming these characters, in putting some lifeblood into them and making them feel, and more importantly, making them connect with other characters in the novel. Yeah.
Right. Right. I like what you said about metabolizing experiences. I think it's a whole, that's what the novel is all about. It's
Yes.
about the everyday, and it's about people who live the everyday. So,
Mhm.
like I said, the sights and the sounds, and like you said, metabolizing the experiences. So I think it's all of that comes together in the novel.
Indeed. Yes. I hope so. Yeah.
Now, let's talk about writing as a process, not just as a creative one, but also an emotional saga. Now, would you say that writing, especially fiction, is a kind of healing, at least for you personally, and perhaps even for your readers?
Yeah, I think so. I think, recently I've started writing. I'll come to your question in a minute.
Mm,
But I started writing poetry because I had some uh, family concern, and then it
mm,
became a way of coping with that. So I would write
right,
uh, to cope with what was happening.
mm,
Be that as it may, I think writing of any kind, whether it's poetry or fiction, is a form of healing. It does
right.
gives you a sense to, it's a bit like a catharsis, a
Mm,
well-controlled catharsis, if you like. And I think we all have stories to tell, and if the stories connect with some other people, then
right,
it is even more gratifying. It validates you, and also it makes you feel that you're not alone. And that
right.
is a particularly important thing in this world that is
Mm,
so structured. It's structured in such a way that we all live in cocoons, in bubbles,
mm,
without technology, iPhones and so on. So
mm,
in a way, it is a way of building bridges between barriers that have been self-imposed and self-created. Yeah, I think I would think that writing is certainly therapeutic. It is rewarding. It is gratifying. And if someone likes it, I think, it kind of encourages you to do more of it. Yeah.
absolutely. It gives you that sense of connect, I think, with your readers, and the readers also connect with you. So I think that is where that healing comes in, that catharsis comes in, that
I,
whole writing process.
I know you're a recognized poet, so maybe
Not recognized, but I'm a poet.
maybe the process is similar to
I think it is. I think it is. I think
yeah,
it is the same for all writers almost. I mean, it helps them connect, especially today when the world is so isolated, and I mean, like it isolates you. You feel so isolated from the rest of the world. Everyone does. So I
yeah,
think, I mean, this is one way of connecting and staying sane,
yes.
if I may say that, with
If you have a
so
secret, you're alone. Yeah. Mhm.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Now le- let's come to another issue, which is that of migration.
Mhm.
Um, Now, migration often brings with it a reshaping of identity. And for many who live between cultures, it's not just about geography, but about belonging, memory, and reinvention. What are your thoughts on how migration influences identity, especially for someone who's constantly negotiating between two homes?
Mhm. Yeah, let me take my own example. I was born and raised in Hyderabad,
Mm,
and like I said, in a middle class family, and in a culture in Hyderabad, which was very multicultural.
mm,
I My class was, at least half of them were boys,
mm,
from Muslim families, and the other half were Hindus and some Christians and so on. And I don't think it even crossed my mind at that time that we were different.
mm.
Uh, so that is how uh, I was, if you like, emotionally packaged at that time.
Right.
And And then I think, I left for England in 1974. I was in my late 20s.
Mm,
So I was leaving from a culture where the north and the south of India meet and mingle.
mm,
And it happen in any other state like Karnataka or Tamil Nadu or so on. Because
mm,
I would speak in English with my father, with my mother, I would speak in Tamil. And between
mm,
us siblings, we spoke in Hindi or Urdu.
mm,
So that is how I was raised. And then I went to England and I stayed there for 10 years. And
mm,
then 10 years I came to Canada in 1984.
mm,
So who am I is the question. I'm all these things. So I cannot erase my past. I cannot erase my place. It is more like a layer that is added to my
correct.
identity.
Mm,
So in a way, I think migration is an interesting experience. It could be individual because it also depends on when you migrate. If you're migrating in your 20s, maybe you're less rooted, if you like. You're more open
mm,
to other cultures. But when I came to Canada, I was in my 40s. And
mm,
fortunately, I came to a country where multiculturalism was encouraged. But
right.
having said that, I think what happens in this journey of migration is that you come with a foundational set of values from, let's say, Hyderabad in this case, and from India.
Mm,
And then you have different value systems, different levels of tolerance, and so on. And
mm,
it really depends on how the host country receives you,
mm,
because it's not going to be warm in its reception. Then you tend to become even more rooted. But on the other hand, if it encourages you with open arms to, you know,
mm,
and be part of them, then
right.
I think it's a very much more exciting journey. And also, I think it gives you, as a psychiatrist at least, it gave me a sense as to what it was like for native-born white Canadian who have not seen a single immigrant in their entire lives.
Mm, mm,
Suddenly you have so many immigrants from the 60s onward, the Indian and African and Middle Eastern subcontinents were opened up to
right.
immigration. So
Mm,
what is it like for them to see other people who are also having a Canadian passport and a Canadian identity, and they don't look
right.
like at all? So this is where I
Right.
think things like food and culture and so on come in. So on the whole, I would say that uh, my identity has been more fluid. It's not been fixed.
Right.
Where I came
Mm,
from, maybe I would think of myself more like a hybrid now. Wherein I am
mm,
able to participate fully, if not fully, at least mostly in the culture that I've been placed in, without necessarily losing my own culture. So I think I have a bit of both worlds, and this, in a way, I think opens up your lens of perception of the world into a more interesting kind of dimension. Yeah.
absolutely. Do you feel that writing Reunion allowed you to connect with your past or perhaps process parts of your story culturally or emotionally?
Yeah, I think it did. I think it was like opening doors that I had not opened before, or I had not entered for a long period of time. Because I left India in the 70s, and most of my life now I've lived in the West. So it was like going back to something that I had left a very long time ago. And then what I discovered is much more than nostalgia. You look at yourself and where you came from a slightly different perspective now. I think you have so much more compassion. And
Absolutely.
also, I find that you are more curious. There is more clarity to what I see now. And certainly, it kind of I was a little disenchanted through
Mm,
this job because I somehow felt that uh, the India this is not the India that I left so many years ago. It has changed.
right.
You know,
Mm,
I have changed, and India has also changed.
mm,
So it's a little bit difficult to navigate.
Mm.
It was so familiar for me. Although, don't get me wrong, I still love the country.
Mhm.
The well-known cliche in my case is, you can take me out of Hyderabad, but can't take Hyderabad out of me. I don't lose a single opportunity to break into Hindi and Urdu and enjoy a conversation. So that's what I would say, that it has thrown a different, magnifying sort of image, a magnified image of what I left so many years ago. Yeah.
I think that sense of disenchantment is common to all modern writers. Everyone talks of this sense
Mhm.
of disenchantment, which is with themselves, with the way they've changed, with the way things around them have changed. So
Yes.
it's kind of like feeling very unmoored and sort of
Yeah.
not neither here nor there kind of
Yeah.
feeling. It's kind of
Yeah.
it's a feeling that I think all modern writers go through.
Yeah. Also, I should add that there's a sense of loss and a sense of liberation as well.
Absolutely,
The sense
absolutely.
of loss is having lost something that you had and that was so enriching, and
Right.
then a sense of liberation because you feel that you are able to see it from away. If
Mm.
you like, you're not part of that. You are at a safe distance,
Safe distance.
and that kind of is a little emancipating in itself. Yeah.
Um, our audience would love to know. Now, those who have those, a lot of us feel that we have a story inside us, but we are hesitant to share it, whether it's due to fear, whether it's due to doubt, or simply inertia. What is your advice to such people who want to express themselves but just cannot?
I feel that everyone has a story to tell,
Mm,
and in a way, it is waiting to be told by you.
mm,
So from that perspective, I think just as I started, if I can write, anybody else can write. I think would be my advice to any potential writers. And I think the important thing is to start the process, in some way, shape, or form. And I think if you just start writing about an idea or about a place or an experience, then it tends to take a life of its own and it grows, and then you go with the flow. So that has
right.
been my personal experience with this. And also I think it's important. It also has a generational value in the sense that if one is of my age or even younger than them, maybe you owe it to the younger generation to tell you a story.
Mm,
Because, the cliche that you don't know who you are until you know
mm,
where you came from is very important.
absolutely.
It's also important to know who you are in order to know where you're going.
Mm, right.
Though that's a overly simplistic way of looking at identity,
Mm,
uh,
mm,
but even so, I think telling that story to your children and grandchildren. After all, we learn by living, by listening to stories and reading stories, and
correct.
listening to people's experiences and so on. So I would say, uh, go for it, and you'll surprise yourself.
Absolutely. I think that first act, that first step
Yeah,
is important. And after that, I think it'll all fall into place.
fall
It's
into
just that
place.
first step is always hard, but then you
Exactly.
take that first step and then it just
Yeah.
comes to you, I think.
And
So
it doesn't have to be in English, it can be in any language,
yeah. Mm,
So one shouldn't, be constrained by, what type of language you want to write in. Yeah.
right, right. Now, coming to my last question. Um, Now, in today's fast-moving, hyper-connected, uh, isolating world, so to say, storytelling often feels like a rare act of reflection or something priceless. So, why do you think storytelling matters now more than ever?
I think it matters because we are living in a world of strife. Uh,
Hmm.
I think, right now, I think in the realm of politics, for example, the ethos is very divisive, with the rise
Right,
in populism on the one hand and then progressivism on the other. I think so people
right.
are not able to talk to each other,
Mm,
And I think it was Malcolm Gladwell who wrote in one of his books that the way to talk to somebody who does not agree with you,
mm,
is to form a relationship first.
mm,
Until you have a relationship, you will not be able to communicate with anyone. So I think that is important to approach this in a friendly manner, to approach it in a manner that is healthy, which is not conflict ridden, and to have a conversation. And an
Right.
important thing is to not determine who's right and who's wrong. This is where all the schisms happen.
Right.
So I think I would say that in our own little worlds, in our universes, I think it's important to be able to remain connected, even with people who do not agree with you. I think somebody said that everyone has a virtue, of some sort, however flawed one is. So it's important for us to find out how you can find that, how to connect with that. So that would be my general comment about that. And I think it's very important we do that. Time is of the essence, because we are under siege right now. For example, in Canada, for example, the president of the United States wanted to make us the 51st state of the United States. Our
Right.
whole, it was like an existential. How do you handle that? Then people know that Americans don't feel like that. So you remain connected with the people rather than the administration.
Right.
So you look at it personally, politically, economically. I think to remain connected is possible, and it should be attempted. Yeah. So you're going to say something. Yeah. You're going to say.
No. I just said that your insights are really very relevant and very sort of comprehensive, and very sort of resonating with the modern world and the modern way we live. I mean,
Yes.
what I like about what you said, all of what you said, is it sort of tries to tie everything together, to sort of bring everything, to make sense out of all the madness, to make sense out of all the discord, of all the the pieces that are around us. You try and sort of take it and give it some unity, some identity,
Yes.
which I think is very important in today's world, for everyone to make sense of themselves and the world around them, to go forward.
Yeah.
So Dr. Raj, thank you for this wonderful conversation. Your words have given us insight not only into your journey, but also into the power of healing through narrative and words. Reunion is more than just a novel. It's a window into how fiction can help us comfort, reshape, and even embrace the most complex parts of ourselves. To our listeners, thank you for joining us today. If you enjoyed this conversation, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to In Conversation for more such voices and stories. Until next time, take care and keep listening. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Joseph.